It's so lovely to actually see you and talk to you.
Yeah, same here.
I loved your talk at Cine XS last year.
Oh, thank you.
I really enjoyed it so very much. And, you know, following everything that you're doing in terms of academia and film work, it's really very inspiring to see someone who's both promoting women in this work as well as, you know, interested in the intersectionalities that a lot of people who do horror research aren't really spending time on that. So,
well, thank you. That's definitely what I'm trying to do. I'm sure I get it wrong in a million tiny ways, but I am trying. So it's nice to see that it's been noted and appreciated. So thank you.
yeah. And just so you know a little bit about my background, like I'm Ariel Basca. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, author, and huge fan of your work in general.
Oh.
But I wanted to maybe start with talking to you about what you're doing right now. You have such an intense background. I mean, not only, okay, so first of all, for my audience, Alison Peirse is an associate professor of film at the University of Leeds, but she's a writer in like, oh, so many genres: playwright, screenwriter, researcher, critic, academic author. But what I really want to talk to you about today is your work on women's global horror studies, because I think that's such a fascinating project.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited about it. So I'm currently on research leave. So I've got a grant, which is why I'm able to do quite a lot of things, because I'm not actually having to teach or do management roles at Leeds at the moment. So that's enabling me to do lots of stuff. But as part of my grant, I'm doing a special issue of the journal My Feminism and Visual Culture. And I want to do it around video essays. I really love video essays. I always have done. I always wanted to make them and was really overwhelmed about where to even begin. I've got no technical background whatsoever, and I thought it was beyond me. But I thought I'm going to just put this special issue together where lots of different kinds of people can come and do video essays. And then I'd kind of said in the call for papers around women filmmakers and horror. And I'd said I'd really like to get as many from the global south as possible. And I honestly just didn't know if I would get many, and by that I'm talking about like Latin America, Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia. And I was just blown away by the number I've got. Between you and me, Ariel, because this is not a podcast, right? No, like no one will know, but between you and me, I've got over 30 people contributing.
That's amazing.
And like we'll see, because you know it's a 9-month mentoring and training program, and you know people are human and they have lives and stuff happens. So I'm absolutely like desperate to release essentially what my table of contents is, and like who's covering what film and who they are and what they're doing with the film and what part of the world the film's from. But I also don't want to make anyone worried who might be involved in case they have to like drop out and then they feel bad. But it's like the entire kind of 30 plus contributors are all writing on the global south, and I've kind of grouped them into 3 regions, because I've got bigger plans for this project beyond the special issue. But I've kind of got Latin America as a region, and then I've got Africa, Middle East and South Asia as a region, and then I've got Southeast Asia and East Asia as a region.
Wow.
And the idea is that all these people writing in these areas will get totally mixed up for the technical trainings, because I don't want to siloize it. I don't want to be like, like only the people writing on the Middle East can talk to the people from the Middle East, because that's not really what this is about. But I've got 2, they have 2 kinds of groups. So they have a technical training group where they'll learn how to make video essays, and everybody's mixed up for that according to ability. So you'll meet people that way, and it's all done online. And then we've got the regional group, which is the opportunity to meet the other people who are working on the films that come from the same region as the film you're working on. And what I'm really hoping there is it's kind of mentorship and also just peer community building. Like, these people that I've got working on this issue are from all over the world, genuinely. Like, I was working out the time zones, and because I'm in the UK, I was doing it on Greenwich Mean Time, and it goes from like -11 Greenwich Mean Time to +7. Like, it's wild. So I just wanted to, and a lot of the people who are doing it are early career, or they're not even in academia, and I wanted to make sure everyone could get together and go, hey, you write about Indian horror cinema, I write about Indian horror cinema, let's make friends. So I've got that going on. So that's the big way I'm doing it. And this video essay special issue will come out, and even though it's a journal, it's going to be open access, it's for everybody. It's really important that anyone can watch these. Like, it's really important to me. Like, I'm trying to undo the decades of work in horror studies, which means that horror films are understood to be white, American, or Anglophone at the very least, made by a white guy in a black t-shirt, and like, that's it. You know, I don't want it to be like that. So I want it to be available for everyone. And it's one of the reasons, and I've nearly done, I promise. I'm just very evangelical about this.
Oh, absolutely. You're here for the evangelism.
Oh, great. Thank you. And one of the reasons I picked video essays was, besides the fact that I really love them, is that it opens up research and thinking to such a bigger audience. Like, and I know from doing my last book, Women Make Horror, and I know from my newsletter that there are so many like smart, interested people out there in the world who aren't academics and want to know stuff and are interested in knowing stuff and finding out stuff about women and horror. And I just think the video essay is like a really beautiful, accessible form that people can do the research without being stuck behind like paywall journals, or that unnecessary thing in academia where we feel we have to write in really convoluted, complicated sentences and quote loads of theorists. So the video essays is a form that I think will just make all of this good stuff like go even further out into the world. That's the plan.
Yeah. Well, and it's also a beautifully accessible form, both for, you know, people who may not be native English speakers, as well as people who, you know, are watching it, you know, assuming you have captions. You know, it's really incredible how many more people you can reach sometimes with a video essay than you would expect.
Completely. And it's just knowing that you can tell the story through like audio visual keys. Like, I don't expect, like, none of my contributors need to provide a voiceover if they don't want to. They could do it all just through sound and image and visuals, and I'd be completely happy with that. You know, we can make it as kind of universal as we want, just through using sound and music and pictures.
Exactly. I think that's amazing.
Thank
Hello,
you.
Rabia.
Hi, Rabia.
Hi there. Quickly. So, Alison, Rabia.
Hello. Nice to meet you. I rushed in for my daughter's graduation, so let's get this.
Feel very honored. Thank you.
So we all watched Dearest Sister to prepare for this particular episode. And this is a brilliant film that I absolutely adore. But do you want to say a few words, maybe, Alison, about how this relates to your project?
Yeah, sure. So I came across Dearest Sister a few years ago, just because I knew it was directed by a woman. It's directed by Mattie Do, the first female director in Laos. And
quick point of pride here. Mattie Do also happens to be on the board of directors for Ride the Omnibus, our lovely podcast. So,
yay! Well, that's
she's obviously our patron saint, our goddess that we worship at the altar of every day. So yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, yeah, I discovered her and her work a few years ago, and it's just as a point of interest to me to just always try and watch as much women-made horror as possible. Like, it doesn't have to be by a woman director. I'm interested in lots of different roles, but directors are so much more prominent. They tend to stand out more, don't they, in like the online discourse. You notice these things. And so I saw Dearest Sister a few years ago, loved it. It wasn't what I thought it was necessarily going to be, and it was all the better for it. And I liked it so much, I made sure I got it into 3 Ways to Dine Well the essay film I made last year. There's just a little moment from Dearest Sister in there, my little nod to my love of Mattie Do. So that's where I've come to it from, and obviously I've rewatched it for today.
Yeah, and I want to hear from Rabia as well. Like, how did you come to this film when you first experienced it as someone with a South Asian background? Like, I'm very curious, how you first reacted to this film.
Back when this movie was about to premiere on Shudder, Shudder was doing, I think, one of their first years where they were doing Female Horror History Month or Female Horror Month. And this is one of the first directors that they started to work with. And it's so interesting. For me, it was amazing to see someone who is Lao to get this type of attention, because it's a part of South Asia or Southeast Asia that not a lot of people focus on. People know Japan, they know Korea, they know India, but stuff like Thai movies are still a little on the fringe. Lao movies, Cambodian movies, nowadays, finally, Indonesian movies are already becoming mainstream thanks to, and not only Joko Anwar and the Mo brothers, but they're part of it. So seeing Mattie Do getting this attention and then hearing, first of all, it was an amazing movie. But then on top of that, seeing that she was the first ever director, female, male, other gender included, to even export this internationally from Lao. So she's a national treasure in that case for the Lao local film industry. And then she brought horror out into the world as a Lao representative, and a really good feminine horror as well. So the representation that came together in that one movie and that one piece and everything that occurred around it, and with all the exposure that it got, I felt I'm not even Lao myself, but I felt very proud as a South Asian person. It's like, yes, we're getting like really, really good representation, and it's from a person who's from there, and it's not, some white guy who went to a country and then made something and called it as if it was from that country. I mean, nothing, I wouldn't say nothing wrong with that, but it happens a lot. So yeah, seeing what Mattie Do did, the type of like glass ceilings that she broke with this one film, not only for women in Lao, not only for directors from Lao, but on top of that, also the stigma around horror. Yeah, that was really, really big impact for me.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating film for me, from other lenses as well, because both Rabia and I are queer disabled creators. And so, when we look at it through the lens of disability, it's not only a powerful film, because of what it represents, what it is in terms of the female relationships that are portrayed within it, but then also looking at how disability is reflected both in the culture and in, sort of this very unique lens that you don't typically see. And so I kind of wanted to start by asking the group, what do you feel about the way that vision is portrayed in this film? Because I think the lead character in Dearest Sister, who is losing her sight, she has a degenerative visual impairment, and there is a lot that happens because of this. And I feel like there's a very specific kind of role that both not just plot wise, but that thematically this loss of vision feels like a lot more to me. And I just was wondering if you wanted to comment on that. Starting with you, Alison, because you get to be in the hot seat.
I was like, I'm going to be really
first.
British and polite and just wait for someone to go first. I've just spent nearly 3 weeks in America learning how British I am. So
yeah, nothing will teach you better how British you are.
Yeah, exactly. But to go back to your point, I found it, the way that vision is used, really interesting. I was thinking about it with the screenwriting background. I was thinking about it more in terms of character connection rather than strictly through, say, a lens of disability. But I'd love to know what you come with it as well. What I was really interested in rewatching it is how my expectations around the characters shift, knowing that I know how it ended. So, and you can relate that directly to the vision. So what I realized very quickly early on is that Anna, who has the degenerative visual impairment, we're so much tighter to her as a character because she's the only character that we get like an ocular point of view from, and that brings us much closer to her. And Knock is always a closed book most of the time, unless she's like topping her phone up, which she's really interested in. But I mean, we get a sense of what she likes, but in terms of the film explicitly, it's trying to structure an engagement. The way it does that is through intimacy, and it's through Anna's point of view, and it's through us seeing the world through Anna's eyes, and we get that emotion from Anna as a result. Arguably, you could then make a thematic point about it as well, around kind of loss of vision. And that would be that although Anna doesn't want her there at first, she comes to like Knock until she realizes what she's really like. And when she calls her dearest sister, you know, and she comes to rely on her, that is another kind of impairment of vision that we've established by that point, that Knock isn't necessarily this stereotyped archetypal girl from the country who's there simply to serve and is naive and vulnerable. Like Mattie Do is clearly playing with these kind of stereotype perceptions about country and town and like vulnerability and innocence, and we've already established Knock's quite not what she seems, but it takes Anna longer. So we get her kind of the impairment of her vision is not only through giving us a tight point of view on her, which is the only character we get to do that with, but it means that we have that that disjunction between what Anna thinks and what we know as the audience, and we can see where her vision about Knock is actually starting to fail her in ways that will prove to be quite dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed.
And the whole interplay of you know, exactly how all of the women function within this, you know, also seems to be kind of a major thematic as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts, Rabia.
Well, I really, really like what Alison just mentioned. And on top of that, for me, it was kind of interesting because it was my so many time watching Dearest Sister to see that where Anna is losing physical vision and is eventually regaining insight on Knock. Knock, the more insight she has, the less mental vision that she gets. So there's this parallel that is between the two women, where one is physically losing vision but gaining more insight, and the other one is gaining more vision, quote unquote, but not in the physical sense, but then losing it actually more and more the more she gets access to it. So because Knock eventually, spoilers, goes off the rails. So I'm sorry if you haven't seen this yet. That's a big spoiler, I guess.
That's your fault if you haven't seen it yet. You should
watch it.
Why are you listening?
Why are you listening?
Go to your streaming right now. Listen to watch Dearest Sister, and then come back and listen to this episode. So I think that's an interesting parallel where the one has physical vision but can't see in the mental sense, and the other one is losing vision but gains insight through the experience that then follows.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I find fascinating too is how the vision is presented by Mattie Do. It's a very unique kind of lens situation. It looks like she's kind of greased up the lens to create this blurred effect, but then there are little drips of black that come down the lens, and it's so beautifully done that it makes, you know, what the visions that she's having all the creepier, all the more surreal. And it's one of the very few times that I've seen a representation of what visual impairment looks like that seemed accurate to me. in some sense,
I
because
was going to ask you, especially to you, Ariel, because you are someone who lives with a disability that affects your vision. How did you feel overall, and with those particular moments? Like, if you put the whole movie into through your lens, do you feel that it has been done in a respectful or in a way that you can empathize with?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, as someone like I not only have a visual impairment, I mean, I'm only blind in one eye, but if I don't have my glasses, I literally see about as well as the main character, Anna. And it's interesting to me, looking at this film, directed by someone with so much sensitivity who doesn't necessarily have this experience themselves. There's so much empathy that comes through the screen, especially when you see her fighting with very, very typical problems that are faced in the blind community, which is people moving things. Just very small activities that are basically weaponized by the housekeeper in this film. And you see, how vulnerable you can become when someone tries to weaponize medical neglect, when someone tries to weaponize, very simple things like moving things, and disrespecting what you need and what your needs are as a person with disabilities. And I found that fascinating. And it's something that I have never seen really in a Western film, certainly. And I've never really seen it portrayed in this, very kind of nuanced way that respects both character and story, as well as an overarching narrative about what it means to be in this position. I don't know. How did you react to that aspect, Rabia, as a disabled?
Yeah, so my vision has different issues, but in general, indeed, what you're mentioning, those sensibilities, those sensitivities, that's the word I'm looking for, the sensitivities that Mattie Do has imbued in those particular acts, that, there is a lot of ableism in Asia, unfortunately, especially in Southeast Asian countries, because in general, people are just trying to survive. So if you're not physically capable to survive, unless you come from a wealthy family or a well-off family, or you're in a situation that can, accommodate you, they don't have a particular way of, being accommodating. And people kind of look down onto people who have any type of disability, whether it's mental, physical, neurological, doesn't matter. So seeing that also with the housekeeper and the gardener dude, and how nasty they actually are towards Anna, and what they really think, and she's just being difficult, and then seeing the husband / boyfriend, white guy, just going around doing his thing, and the ableism that came forth through that. I mean, it was well portrayed. It felt very, very authentic.
There's just such an interesting interaction in the film for me between kind of cruelty and then empathy, because I was thinking about what you were both saying, and I was thinking about the way, as a filmmaker, I feel that Mattie Do in this film as a whole is very good at the empathy with Anna and understanding her, and at the same time is fully able to execute all of the characters. I mean, and Anna herself is cruel in many small and insidious ways, but like everyone else in this film is cruel in a really different kind of way. Like, it's like a masterclass in a series of characters who all subtly can be horrible to each other. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. Like, I really enjoyed watching the many manifest ways that people can be mean to each other, but the whole film is so cruel, and yet at the same time is made through a lens that is so empathetic. It's just a really interesting combination, because I've watched a lot of bad horror films with people being horrible to each other, but it's rare to get that level of empathy that you get here as a kind of counterpoint to that.
And even Knock, you get the sense that she has empathy for Knock all throughout the film, you know, in spite of the fact that she is like patently a horrible person, right?
Yeah,
And
but apart from she likes that grandma that sits at the stall opposite, you know, there's a stall holder and his mother, his mother, and she's like the only person apart from herself that there's any empathy for at all from Knock. That's like, it's literally it. It's like we'll show her being nice to an old lady, but like she's not interested in anybody else at all.
Yeah, she has some type of filial piety, but
Yeah.
not towards her own family. That's
yeah,
it.
exactly.
yeah,
They
that's for
can.
sure.
She's there to take them for all that she can.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of fascinating also to see the way that ideas of class and culture are played with
Yeah.
throughout this film. Because you have the class conflicts that are happening, you have the Western versus Eastern culture conflicts that are happening. You have a lot of very pointed criticism from Mattie Do about NGOs. Obviously, she has a lot to say on that subject when she came on this podcast before. But it's really fascinating to me how all of these dichotomies are kind of presented in these fascinating ways. And I wondered kind of which conflict do you see as the primary conflict in this film, Alison, as our expert?
I kept making notes. I mean, this won't show up if it's like an audio podcast, but I can show you two. Like, I made so many notes when I was watching this film again.
Wow.
There's just pages and pages and pages of notes. And I just like free writing it because it gave me so many thoughts. But what I kept coming back to again and again, obviously, was power and how power is explored in this film. And it's like explored in multiple levels and multiple ways. You have the kind of city and country distinction, and then you move into the house and you have servants versus the homeowners. But then it's almost like Mattie does, like, right, okay, like we all know what that looks like. Let's jettison that in favor of some more interesting stuff. And she just kind of then digs in, and obviously, like, money is a central theme of the whole film. Everybody wants money, even Anna, who's pretending that she doesn't think about such things. Obviously, it's always about money and what power money brings. But then, like, within that, I thought one of the most interesting things about the way power is then explored is also through language, and about what kind of currency you have according to the languages that you can speak, and how that becomes a form of power as well. And even it's just the smallest thing after Knox being found out and cast out of the house, but then the servants are sacked as well. And then Knox invited back in to care for Anna, but she's asked, can you read Thai? And it's really important that she can read Thai in order to dispense Anna's eye medication. So there's all these things about, you know, can you speak the language? Can you not? Can you speak English? What does that make to you? And when people are understanding and are choosing not to understand, whether that's English or Laos, like it goes either way. And when people don't understand and people talk at them in English instead anyway, and it's just all these really subtle, minute power plays that come out of the language as well. And that's what, so like power and money.
Yeah.
Well, language also comes into play in creating empathy and sympathy, right? Especially in Asian countries. We have so many titles to connect people, or, you know, establish how we see them in society in relation to ourselves. You know, and it doesn't matter which Asian country you go to, there are always different words, whether for your uncle or your mother's side or your father's side, you know. And especially this thing that we do in Southeast Asia and South Asia is calling people brother and sister or aunt and uncle on the street. Because establishing that relation, making someone closer than you act, or whether they're a complete stranger or not, makes you more favorable to them. So if you call the taxi driver bro or hey uncle, he'll give you a better fare. He'll make sure that you safely, as a woman in this case, safely arrive at your destination, where it might not be as safe for you, you know, as a femme presenting or a single female to be at. So this Anna calling Nock dearest sister is also an attempt to connect Nock in a way to make Nock feel more responsible for her. Whether Nock feels that already or not, whether their relation has been good or not, that is basically calling someone dearest sister in your in your native tongue in Asia is basically saying like we're very close. We're closer. We're close enough to be family. Whether we actually are or not doesn't matter. But we're close enough to be family. I want you to take responsibility for me. I will take responsibility for you. And that's why the title of this movie and eventually what happens between the two of them is so important, because all those relations and those hierarchies are so important. And then it gets, flipped out of whack because of all the things that happen. But then on does this attempt of like, calling Nock dearest sister, like, please take care of me. Like, please be responsible for me. Please, I want to connect with you in a way, or at least for you to take care of me in a way that I don't die. And that makes it so strong because that's part of language as well, especially in Asian countries.
And is that part of can that be like mapped onto the ideas around power as well or something?
Yeah.
Is the naming of it, can that be seen as an attempt to subtly have some form of power? Because if it's ultimately saying, I want you to feel that you're close to me and that I would look after you and you will look after me.
True. And it's in a way also hierarchy is established through those lines, because if I would call someone Didi, which is in Hindi older sister, I'm establishing that they have a higher place in society towards me. So if they tell me to do something, I will have to do it. The same we have in Korean, Anni. If I would call someone Anni, I don't eat before they eat. I don't, there's like hierarchical rules. If I would call someone uncle instead of bro or little bro, it has a different implication. And that's why that dearest sister is so important, because she says little sis, where she combines that familiarity with there's still a place for each of us. I'm still quote unquote higher up than you, but in a way that, we're familiarized with each other. Yeah. If it would have been the other way around, it would have given Nock more power. Because if I would call someone Choti, which means little sister, basically, I'm establishing that I'm the Didi. That means that I have the high ground, basically. So and it's in Thai and in Lao and in Cambodian and Bhutanese, they're very similar in that way. So the way you say sister, the type of sister that you're establishing in that moment puts the hierarchy in place and kind of locks it in. So that gives it a power moment while also creating that familiarity and kind of this pleading thing of like, please, like I will be responsible for you, but be responsible for me. You have to listen to me because I'm also the higher person in the hierarchy. Yeah.
And it's fascinating the way that plays out in this film, and I wish I actually spoke all of these languages so that I could catch all of these nuances.
Same.
But I find it fascinating the way that power structures are embedded in Asian languages on the whole. And, the way that comes through, both in terms of what you were saying, Alison, in terms of the power structure of what language you're speaking, but then within the language itself, I think is a really fascinating thing. And I really, really want to dive in. I know we have kind of limited time today, so I'm going much faster than I mean to, but I just need to get into the character of the husband, because he's a piece of work, and let's go there. Let's do this.
Oh, you take the lead on this one, Ariel.
Me?
Yeah, yes. I feel like you've got things to say.
Well, okay. So
she settles in her seat. Right, here we go.
All right. So, I feel like The husband in a lot of ways represents kind of the colonialism that is parading around as altruism quite a lot in Asian countries in particular, not exclusively Asian countries, obviously. I find that this character is really stunning in terms of the way that Mattie Do has crafted him and his cronies to kind of make it clear the amount of corruption that there happens to be in a lot of these NGOs, supposedly altruistic work, and also the stamp that kind of Western society has put on the world, whether it was entitled to or not. And I find it really fascinating looking at the relationship between the Asian associate and the husband, and just the way that their interplay works, and then the way that he also relates to Nok. Like, both of them relate to Nok in very specific ways that are definitely condescending throughout, but it's a very unique kind of interplay that I'm still kind of working out exactly how I feel about it. And I don't know if you guys have a more definite feeling about these
Alison, be my guest.
I don't have a huge thesis on him beyond what Ariel said, because I just agree completely, obviously. This is such a minor point, but I noticed his character name is credited as Jacob, but I think I've read that he's Estonian, and I was listening out in the film to see how to pronounce his name when I came on the podcast, because like as a British person I would say Jacob, but it could be Jacob or anything, and I never heard his name.
It's never said. That's why I didn't say it. So.
Yeah, and it's like I never heard his name spoken in the film, which I find really interesting, and I'm sure is on purpose, and I would love to hear more of Mattie Do's reasoning for this. And then going on to I think it's Kenji, the
Kenji.
Like the business associate. He's like the most he's probably the most sympathetic of all the characters, and he's still a like massively condescending ass to like when he meets him. He's like, hey, Laos girls like smartphones, play Angry Birds. I'm like, what? This is terrible. But then he goes and like rescues her from this. I like you're watching the scene with the Australian guys, these like beyond middle-aged, overweight Australian guys out, and then you're like every red flag that could be is up, and you're like, get out of there, get out of there, get out of there, this is not safe, this is not going well. And so I'm, even though he's a condescending, patronizing asshole, I'm still like, oh, thank God thank God Kenji rescued her, because she would have just said okay and gone along, I think, unless she had a secret plan to like do something evil, but I don't think she did. So I was actually quite relieved that he got her out of there. And then I was, again, this is what I mean about him being like the most, in a film filled with people being cruel, he's like the one, and he still doesn't take advantage of her at the end, which is something like she's inviting him in and he's like, no, I'm not coming in. And I just thought, I've watched so many horror films, and you're just like, oh, he's going to come in. Like, let's not. It's not the power imbalance. Let's not. Yeah. And then he doesn't. I'm like, oh, he might be patronizing, but he could be a lot worse. So
exactly. Well, and you also get the sense in the business relationship that he's standing up to Jacob. So he's got like actual credentials on the moral side as well, in spite of the fact that he's involved with the shady shit and he's condescending asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I have to say a quick joke that I heard this week and makes me very happy. Like, where do mansplainers get their water?
I don't know.
At the well, actually. Anyway, sorry.
Well, actually.
I like that one. I'm going to keep that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to have that. That works. It could go alongside the bit where a man just repeats something I've just said in a meeting and says it back to me as he explains it. That would go down well as well.
Yep. Totally. Totally.
Oh, but I have I follow some women splainers on TikTok, and they have the amazing remedies for that. So whenever a man does that, like he repeats your words back to you as if it's his idea, you should interrupt him and say like, oh wow, you really have good listening skills. Yeah, that is exactly what I said 2 minutes ago. It's good that you understand that concept so quickly. I'm so proud of you. Yeah.
That's excellent.
But that one as well.
Yeah, sorry.
but I do want to, you know, say that like women in this film though, you know, even though I find the men interesting, like it's the relationships between the women in this film, the housekeeper specifically, as well as Anna and Nook, and the way that their relationships change as they realize more and more about each other is really fascinating to me. And I wondered, you know, for you, Rabia, like this whole this whole sort of transformative process that Nook goes through as she decides that she's going to start siphoning off money and start you know, trying to experience life in a more westernized kind of way, like while simultaneously, you know, not sending money to her family, etc. You know, can you talk a little bit about exactly how un-Asian that is?
Well, let's break it down first, because we mentioned before that the husband, the Estonian, the boyfriend, you know, he never gets named, or his name is never mentioned in the movie, which is super interesting because in general, and this is the one thing I can generalize about Asian countries and Asian cultures in general, whether it's from Turkey all the way to Japan, is that you don't often say people's names. So that in this household they actually did use names means that they feel or wanted to present themselves very westernized, and that comes back to what Alison mentioned, right, with the colonization and such. So towards this white man, they are presenting as if more westernized than they actually are. Nowhere in any Asian household would the housekeeper, you know, address the main lady of the house as just madam. You would say, you know, with some type of suffix or one of those hierarchy words that I was mentioning before, right? And then the other way around, if it's someone who's been working in your house for a long time, you don't call them by their name. That's super disrespectful. You would call the lady who's been working in your house, whether it's for a few years or a lot of years, some type of hierarchy name, and then with like some respect suffix behind it. So the fact that they were using this very anglicized, very westernized way of addressing each other, except for the one white person that was actually in the house, was very interesting to see for me. And then to look at that, indeed, like a very un-Asianness, with filial piety being very important. You know, the social structures that you have in Asia, where, you know, you take care, you have this social obligation to take care of your parents, of your family. Again, that's why that naming and hierarchy is so important, right? Because then you pull them into that social responsibility, because once this person now becomes your dearest sister, they now have this societal pressure of taking care of you, because you've pulled them in with that hierarchy naming. So looking at Nook and how westernized she actually wants to become, how she puts all of her cultural teachings and background actually to the side. She comes into this house, she looks around, she sees a white guy, you know, she immediately is like, oh, this is very more Western. She changes phones, she starts hungering for money, she stops sending money home. The way she acts becomes more and more westernized throughout the film, up to a point that she's, you know, egotistical, greedy, you know, cruel. These are things that it was weird to say, like, no, it is not inherently Asian. That's not per se what I'm trying to say, but it's very atypical for someone with a particular background to basically deconstruct their own cultural habits in such a short time, and to then see them become more and more westernized. Basically what that Jakob or the white man is doing.
The white
There's
man.
only one. He's the white guy.
There's only one
He's
man.
the token white guy.
Yeah, but the funny thing is there's only one white man in that household, but it's affecting the whole household. It's affecting their the deconstruction of their cultural habits, the way they speak, their language, how they treat each other. And there's colonization happening without him actively being part of it even. So it's part almost like colonization by proxy in a way.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to see, just to impress, because this white face, and again that's post-colonization and post-war behavior that's still stuck in Asia, and that's in all of Asia, again from Turkey all the way to Japan and everything that's in between, is that, you know, someone with lighter skin, someone from a Western background is seen as higher, as more desirable, as rich, because those are the people who came in and had money and guns and took everything away. They had the power. So this man has the power simply due to his skin color and having blonde hair. And because of that, even without him actively doing anything, there is colonization and behavioral change happening in that whole household.
And it's so interesting hearing you say that, because I was aware of this was going on, but not through necessarily the knowledge of the language and culture that Rabia has just given in a really beautiful way. But I'd just seen it far more basically through the costume design. And, you know, she like not systematically alters her clothing pretty much the day after she moves in. And I thought at first, I was watching the costume design and watching how she changed what she wore, and I thought this is about the kind of country to city, from no money to having some money, but it's specifically the Western, because like I realized at one point she was wearing like a kind of plaid check shirt. When she like it was like her second or third lottery win, and she was fully in and on the kind of check shirt that I was wearing in the 1990s and still wear now. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, this is so much more than a simple not having money to money. This is all the westernization stuff going on with it, isn't it? Along with her getting her hair. I think she has her hair lightened as well, doesn't she? And as like she gets her hair lightened and then she puts a check shirt on. And at that point, even I was like, oh, okay. This is a deep cultural thing as well. This isn't just money or like country to city. This is Western culture.
But it's also not just a play on things either. This is a actually very realistic depiction of what does happen with a lot of people who are kind of very slowly sloughing off their identities because of this preferment for, you know, whatever the Western thing might happen to be, whatever that brass ring is that you're supposed to reach for, whatever that status symbol, and the way that identity becomes slowly erased, whether it's cultural or personal or both. And it's a fascinating look in the film at how that happens, with kind of the corruption of money and, you know, sort of the lure of Western things. But then you also see how, you know, this decision on Nock's part to completely de-empathize and I don't know what the word is exactly, but almost dehumanize Anna in every conceivable way. I find, you know, that particular part of this story so fascinating, because I think there tends to be, when you have narratives about women's friendships, there tends to be this automatic assumption that, oh, women are lovely to each other. And just hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and, you know, things are great. You know, and so it's fascinating to see a film that actually dares to be, you know, quite dark in terms of that relationship, but then also, you know, to explore two characters who are extremely awful to each other in different ways, one obviously more than the other.
I would say Knock wins.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's not a rock paper scissors thing at all,
you know.
Yeah.
It's funny because culturally, again, that has significance in South Asia. It's not a secretive thing where women are basically set against each other, even in the different layers of generations. A mother will not give her recipes to her daughter. Her daughter has to figure out how to make that one amazing dish that is like a family heirloom, because giving it to your daughter, you're giving it away to your daughter, and then she becomes your competition. And for some reason, you don't have that generosity towards that new generation. Among women, everyone's your competition, especially in South Asian countries. Everyone is either trying to get your money or getting a better husband than you. So there's a lot of envy and looking down at each other. You know, that whole trying to westernize yourself or fitting in and assimilating into a whatever seems better towards the outside world. That's the main thing that Asian aunties care about. Everyone's talking shit about each other. Everyone's doing shit to each other, and it's the worst. And it's finally now with younger generations that people are just sick of it, and they're kind of done with the whole auntie and uncle situation, as we call it. And that we've become more aware of it and trying to work together instead of apart. But it's taken hundreds and hundreds of years, and to this day you can still see the effects of it. It's so heavily patriarchal, and it's so sad because a lot of these South Asian countries have a history of matriarchal systems that were broken down and then replaced with the patriarchal systems. And as long as the women don't bond and come together, they can't regain that power. So it's this awful way of thinking it stays in place, basically.
It's another patriarchal function, isn't it? Like you were saying, like, God, what would happen if the women actually bonded and got together? Like, then we'd really be in trouble, wouldn't we?
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating because throughout history, that's always been the biggest fear of like women assembling together and actually getting along.
Yeah. And let's include, non-binary and trans people in that as well. Look at India, for instance. Before the British came in, hijras and people from another gender were actually glorified. They're blessed. They're supposed to come to your house and bless your children, your wedding. You want them to come over, you give them money. And now they've been pushed to the, fringes of society, have to do sex work, often in unsafe conditions. And this all because of what the British did and said, like, oh, we don't agree. We don't know this, so we don't agree.
Yeah.
And then destroyed thousands and thousands of years of these beliefs and made it patriarchal. And that fucks everyone. Pardon my French.
Completely.
I will not pardon your French.
Pardon, mademoiselle. Excusez-moi.
But no, and I think that's such an important point to make, just because there is so much that happens as a direct result of, other people's views on the culture, and the way that all of these cultural shifts and changes play out is really terrifying to me. As a former Latin teacher, like, always talking about the megalomaniacal fuckwits of history, and exactly how much they screwed over all the languages and all of the cultures. Like, it's fascinating to me looking at products like Dearest Sister and looking at, the way that they encode this in just such a beautiful and subtle kind of way.
Completely.
So, but I wondered if maybe for the last few minutes, we could talk about the ending of the film. Because I love the ending of this film so much. I recently showed it to a friend of mine who is from the Philippines, and she just flipped out at the end of the film. She thought it was maybe the best ending of anything she'd ever seen, or at least maybe in the last year. And I wondered if you could each tell me how it hit for you when you first saw it.
It pleased me very much. I remembered from watching it before how it ended in principle, but I hadn't like retained the shots and the framing like in my head. So when I rewatched it for this, I was so pleased by it. And this is going to sound like weird, but given that like I work on horror films, I'm particularly interested in women filmmakers, but what I come up against often is people going, oh well, you know, if you want to look at female directors, I guess you're going to look at female characters then. And I'm thinking, well, not necessarily, because not everybody analyzes John Carpenter's films. We don't all analyze masculine anxiety in The Thing because John Carpenter directed it. So and also you know, there are a million different ways to be a woman. So why would there be this way that makes it like why would there be one way that's like makes it a woman's horror film, or why would there be a way that because a woman directed it, something will happen in a certain way? So this kind of thing gets on my nerves because it's what I do day in, day out. So it starts to annoy me after a while. This presumption that there's one way to be a woman and a woman doing it will make it a certain way. But having said all that, the last few shots where we've had a vision, we know what's going to happen, and then we cut to black and we leave it. I genuinely sat there and thought, I can tell a female woman directed that like against everything that I spend all my time going, no, just because it's a woman doesn't mean that it will necessarily be great in terms of violence, and it doesn't mean that at all. I started thinking, you can tell that a woman directed this, because, you know, like in lesser hands, you would have had the full-on fight, stabby scene, cut for action, ultra violence, drenched in blood, and it wasn't needed. None of it was needed, and we didn't need to see their bodies torn up or gaping up, and it didn't lessen the impact of it.
No, not
in any way at all. So I went against all my inclinations, which to say is I can tell a woman directed this, because that ending just knew that we didn't need all that.
Yeah.
And it had faith that we'd followed the characters far enough that it was just as powerful without seeing a slaughterhouse.
And I would argue more powerful for the economy of form.
Completely. It's always worse. I mean, it's always worse what's in my head. I don't know about yours.
So. I mean, like, you think about films like The Hitcher and like Jennifer Jason Leigh getting torn apart by the trucks. It's like, you know, the fact that you don't see it makes it so much worse. And there were so many people who saw it in theaters who were like, oh, it's so disgusting. And what? You didn't
actually see it, your mind.
Right? Yeah. And it's the same concept. How about you, Rabia?
For me, very similar. Just in fact, the fact that you didn't really get to see it, but you know what's going to happen. You know how this ends. It's not a happy ending. I like horror movies who are ballsy enough to just not have an happy ending without any explanation whatsoever. We don't always need to be, you know, coddled and shown like, oh, but this is the thing that happened and now this is an ending. No, fuck that. It's a horror movie. So, you know, if I am horrified or just completely uneasy or just feel like just wretched at the end of a film, you've done your job. Kudos
Exactly.
to you.
Exactly.
So it doesn't always need a nice bow at the end and an explanation and an outro card and everything like that. And I thought it was extra ballsy because it's Mattie Do's first coming out to the world. And I don't know whether she had that in her mind while making this, but this is going out through the whole world, and people will have to understand this. And she just did that. She did it her way, and that ending, it just works. I would not have had it any other way. I don't think an ending like with the L'Intérieur, Inside, where you see the full gore and the two women fighting to the, you know, the fleshy, is slicky, bloody ending. Amazing movie, by the way. Love, you know, French Extremity in that sense, but you know, this was not that type of film, and it ended it in a note that worked for both Western and non-Western audiences. Because again, I'm looking at it with two lenses, right? I'm born in Europe, but I am Asian African myself, so I'm looking at this with the cultural background of both being African and Asian and Arab, but also being European. And it worked. It just worked.
Yeah.
And I think that's commendable towards Mattie Do, definitely.
And it feels true to the film.
Yeah.
Like it's like a subtle film, and it builds and it builds, and it's only about 2/3 of the way through that you realize all the different storylines have inexorably been like creeping up to get like tighter and tighter and tighter. And I was thinking about it, and I know this is her second feature, but like her first going out into the wider world, as Rabia was saying. And there's a real kind of confidence with the filmmaking that I didn't expect from someone at this point in their career. It's not only beautifully shot, but like every shot lands, and like not actually says very, very little in this film. Like, and it's a filmmaker who already understands all the audiovisual keys that you need to tell a story. And what we get at the end is her knowing full well that what we need is what we don't see in the frame, and that the true horror lies outside the frame and in our minds. So it's just incredibly pleasing to see her follow that through all the way through the film, and then to pick an ending where you can kind of go, but you don't need any more. I've done it all for you. I've put it all in your head, and you can go finish it off yourselves now.
Yeah.
How about you, Ariel?
Well, for me, that ending was just glorious, because there's one thing about this film, like, as you know, the horror for me within this film largely lies behind the medical neglect aspect, which I took deeply personally. Probably just because I've been in that situation before, where I was being neglected. My medical needs were being neglected in a very specific passive aggressive kind of way. And the horror of that really landed very strongly for me. But then when it comes to the end just feels like this beautiful catharsis that you think you're about to get, and then you don't. And I love being denied the pleasure of what I want. I really do. There's something magical about any director who is able to tell you, oh, I'm about to give you exactly what... no, I'm not.
No. And you should know better. You should know better than to think it, because all the way through, I've been very masterful. Yeah. So you should know that I'm going to do what I want.
No, and it's just a beautiful ending. And I've now seen this film, I think 4 times, and every time that ending hits me. And, even though I know exactly what's coming, it still lands on a very precise beat. The timing and the pacing of this film is just superb. And obviously, I love it. So that's why we're talking about it.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I know you have a heart out, Alison. So I want to make sure that we're honoring your time. So I'm going to wrap this up and just say thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
It. And this was a blast. And I would love to have you back anytime you want to come back.
Of course.
So because you've got all kinds of exciting projects going on, and you're in festivals now, and everyone should look out for 3 Ways to Dine Well wherever they can. And
it's on the circuit. It's on somewhere at any one point. It's playing somewhere.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know exactly what that's like. So
yeah,
that's how it goes. But thank you so very much. This was a fabulous conversation. I really enjoyed all of the insights that you brought. And oh my gosh, Rabia, you have such a wealth of knowledge about all of these cultural contexts that I'm a
unicorn.
I'm gonna take a quick moment. I'm sorry, Alison. I'm gonna take a quick moment and just say, like, Rabia, you are just gorgeous. Like,
I was not expecting that.
Yeah. Okay.
Aw,
So this
this
is
is
about
lovely.
this is about the anniversary of Rabia and myself as co-hosts. And I just want to say, like, I did this myself for a year before I invited Rabia on, and like she just adds so much beauty and so much joy to this podcast.
Yes.
And thank you, my
so
love.
much.
Aw.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. I enjoy doing this. It tickles my brain. I get to share knowledge. Especially as a brown woman, I don't often get a stage offered to me at all. So this whole experience has been amazing, and I wouldn't want it any other way. And I get to meet awesome people like Allison through this as well. So there you go.
Yes, this is it's very nice, like joining in the loving. Having spoke to you both over email, it's very nice to actually get to see your faces and be in person, so to speak.
Yeah, it's really hard to find really good Egyptian horror movies, by the way.
Yeah, I thought it might be.
I've looked.
Yeah, I suspected as much.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and just tell you like how immensely we appreciate what you do. Thank you, Allison.
Thank
Yes.
you. Right. Well,
Yes.
have good days to both of you.